The Black Studies program at Cleveland State University welcomes you to this season of Images, a public affairs radio forum dedicated to open dialogue on a variety of diverse topics of interest and issues of concern, which focus on the life and experiences of African Americans and all peoples of African descent. By visiting our website at www.csuohio.edu/blackstudies or calling 216-687-3655, you can learn more about upcoming Black Studies program events and activities. Now, here is your host for Images.
And welcome to Images. I'm Prester Pickett, your host for this broadcast of Images. Our conversation today is with the president of our Speak Up organization here at Cleveland State University, Mr. Kelton Latson. Once again, welcome to Images, Kelton.
Thank you for having me.
You're a regular. Your history goes back to interviews conducted by the past director of Black Studies, Dr. Michael Williams, as well as several that we've conducted together. We will have a chance to advance and show our listening audience, because we are now broadcasting on YouTube, as well as allow them to hear the progress that's being made, particularly in a partnership that the African American Cultural Center has with Speak Up because of your talent. So we want to eventually advance into a conversation there. But let's start out with a discussion about your history and have our audience understand your status as a student here, a graduate student at Cleveland State University, and then as a student leader.
Okay. Well, I'm a graduate student here at Cleveland State University in the MUST program, which is a graduate program. It's a 1 year where you earn a master's in education and a teacher's license for future teachers who plan to teach in CMSD schools. I also attended here for my bachelor's, and I received a bachelor's degree in English. So my goal is to one day teach high school English here in the Cleveland School District. And
you are a graduate of Cleveland Central Catholic High School.
Yes.
So staying in this greater Cleveland community has its advantages, particularly in regard to helping a next generation of students acquire the interest in attending Cleveland State University or some institution of higher learning.
Yes. I attended Cleveland Central Catholic High School. I worked with America Scores Cleveland, and I was in several different Slavic Village schools, the Warner Girls Academy, Mound STEM School, Willow Elementary, and Fullerton Elementary, all in the Slavic Village area. So I had the opportunity to work with kids from 3rd grade to 8th grade and to be able to expose them to the forms of poetry, what we do down here at Cleveland State University in the Black Studies Department. So it's definitely been a platform that I've been grateful to have.
With the Black Studies program and the Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center, we often have the opportunity to support the admissions office as they route some of the potential students who are visiting our campus past the Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center. We just recently received a request from Mansfield High School, I believe it was, to have their students join us here. Often when they intersect with us or schedule a special engagement through the Howard Mims Cultural Center, they're able to stop in and get introduced to students like yourself. Right. What are some of the things that you share with our students in regard to getting them to consider why Cleveland State University is one of the institutions they should definitely put at the top of their list?
I look at Cleveland State as in the heart of the city of Cleveland. I look at the city of Cleveland as a place where people pretty much put themselves up by the bootstraps. And when you come to a school like Cleveland State and you get to intermingle with people who come from the same background as you, maybe a different background, but you all have the same goals in life, and it's a great place where you can share ideas and be able to grow and network with people from the city and also people from the surroundings of the city. So it's definitely a great place to come together, share ideas, and be able to just get active and grow with one another.
Obviously, Cleveland State University celebrates diversity, and with that celebration of diversity, we have an African American Cultural Center to allow the Black aesthetics, the history of Black peoples, I would say, and Black cultures to have a presence here at the university. What do you share with the individuals at the Speak Up presentations about how important it is to maintain the cultural traditions that come from an African American and African diasporic experience?
So I always mention African retentions. And African retentions is pretty much where you may do certain things, but you don't really have the understanding of why that is. And a lot of that goes back to what we do traditionally as a culture and the importance of keeping that culture and tradition alive. So I always tell our audience members that, you want to come down to Cleveland State, to the Howard A. Mims Cultural Center, support whether it's Black Student Union or the Black Studies Elites or Speak Up. These are young people with predominantly Black orgs keeping the tradition alive, and it's always important to let the community members know as well that here's a space where you can come, learn, perform arts, and like I said, just engage in thought and ideas. Is being able to have that safe space where everybody can come together and share their cultural difference or cultural similarities and take it from there on.
And then even to advance your own personal interests, because you are a poet, and with the Cultural Center and the efforts in your leadership of Speak Up, an organization that advanced these discussions of celebrating poetry through the Cultural Center into a formal organization, now is something that we're excited about in seeing the growth of students that come through the Howard Mims Cultural Center and utilize it, and then the students that take the Black Studies courses in English that allow them to really understand how to connect back to history and the literature that is gathered in our discipline that advances us into the future. With your background as a poet yourself, you have some tremendous accomplishments, including a publication now. Can you talk about your publication, a book by Kelton Latson, president of Speak Up?
So a book that I publish is Kel's Poetry Blues. It's a book that I've always wanted to do from back to high school. I always talked about wanting to publish a book. I didn't necessarily think it would be poetry. I always thought it would be a creative short story or a novel, but poetry was always my go-to thing, and I figured, okay, maybe this would be my ease in. So I was at Kent State University on a scholarship for my poetry writings, and I spent most of my time in my dorm room just writing poetry from the sun up to sundown. And one of the inspirations to Kel's Poetry Blues was not only my feelings, but it was also jazz music. And I was listening to Miles Davis and the blues. I know he had the all blues song and Blue and Green and stuff like that. And I kind of just used that inspiration that I had and intertwined that into my poetry. And then a few months later came the birth of Kel's Poetry Blues.
Now, in addition to the organization that you lead, the curriculum that you're engaged with as a graduate student, and then again that you were engaged with when you were an undergraduate student here, also engaged you with several courses through Black Studies. One of the courses that's offered here is our Malcolm X and Martin Luther King course that looks at the history of those historic figures that allow us to teach Black Studies. So when we come back from the break, we want to be able to give the audience a chance to see some of the conversations that we have with the discussion of sharing information about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and how we employ that in some of the classroom discussions because of the talents that our students have. Stay tuned to these messages from Cleveland State University.
Established in 1969, the Black Studies program at Cleveland State University is currently comprised of 5 academic components, as well as the Jazz Heritage Orchestra, which contribute to the program's mission to promote knowledge and understanding to be shared with all generations and cultures concerning the rich legacy of the African diaspora. There is the academic program, an interdisciplinary curriculum of nearly 80 courses offering a major and minor in Black Studies. The Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center is open to the public and features art exhibitions, Kumba Arts presentations by various performing artists, a Curtis Wilson lecture series, panel discussions, and Umoja roundtables. The Ralph Pruitt Lecture, Art and Media Series brings international and national speakers, artists, and films to the campus. Images, a half-hour public affairs radio broadcast interviews guests from many fields of endeavor. The 5th component is the Black Aspirations Celebration, a week-long event of culture, arts, and contemporary issues. The Jazz Heritage Orchestra is a 17-piece orchestra comprised of musicians who are educators. The orchestra is a long-standing affiliate of the Black Studies program. The Jazz Heritage Orchestra is dedicated to preserving and perpetuating the musical heritage of the great African-American jazz masters. They are available for performance engagements. Dr. Thomas Bynum is the director of the Black Studies program. Prester Pickett is the coordinator of the African-American Cultural Center. Dennis Reynolds is the artistic director of the Jazz Heritage Orchestra, and I'm Louis Abdul-Wali, the second student to graduate from Cleveland State University with a major in Black Studies from the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences.
And welcome back to Images. I'm Prester Pickett, your host for this broadcast of Images, which allows us to have a conversation with our students who have been very successful here at Cleveland State University, our students who have been engaged in the greater Cleveland community, our students who keep activities going on here at Cleveland State University that advance traditions of the African American, and African diaspora experiences. With this conversation with you continuing, Kelton, as the president of the Speak Up organization, an organization that brings together students who have an interest in the spoken word. So that's taking poetry like yours that is now published, committing it to memory, and then presenting it and performing it for a certain rhetorical effect, if you will. With the conversation of the history that you have with that organization, can you share information about how your organization advanced and your memories or intersections with members of the Black Poetic Society, oppressed poets, and others who now have a chance to come back to Cleveland State University as alumni and see that traditions that they invested in are still alive and well here through the Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center?
One of the things that I've always noticed about Speak Up is the students and community members are able to take what's going on, whether it's on campus or surrounding campus, and just being able to put that into art form and express that. I know it's a long tradition of poets, African American poets, being able to use our conditions and our social climate and putting that into a way where we can all either laugh or share the pain or overcome any type of struggle. And I think Speak Up has pretty much given the platform to students and surrounding Cleveland community members, that same platform that past organizations have always done. And I always think about the BAM movement and the Black Arts movement that was started back in the 70s that actually sparked that idea of being able to take our oppression and struggle and put that into a creative form through poetry.
With an opportunity to engage our alumni, again, we were excited this past week to have a visit by Ron Kisner. He is the founder of The Vindicator, and he came through the Howard Mims Cultural Center and saw the exhibition that displayed even the first copy of the Vindicator that is up in our showcases now. And he came in a little teary-eyed with the joyful tears in seeing that his legacy is still alive and well. So we're excited to think that the Howard Mims Cultural Center is approaching its 50-year golden anniversary. 2020 is that year for us, and we have in our showcases a display that also covers an article that carries the history of the founding of the Cultural Center and that opening day where Carl and Lewis Stokes, with the president of the university, with the president of United Pastors in Mission, if you will, as well as the student organizations and choirs. So we're using the type of work that was done by journalists like you, Kelton, to extend it to another generation. And we talked about how that is what culture is. So some of the discussions that we have as well allow us to talk about traditions that we've experienced, while others allow us to read about traditions. We've partnered on occasions to go to Dr. Donna White's class as she teaches about the history of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. We also use this discussion to enlighten our community about the fact that Malcolm X delivered the ballot or the bullet speech right here in Cleveland, Ohio, prior to his presentation of that same speech in Detroit, Michigan. What connected you to the interests of Malcolm X and then even that speech, the ballot or the bullet, which was delivered on April 3rd, 1964. And then on April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King delivered a very similar speech, the mountaintop speech, the day before he was assassinated. Can you talk about your connection to the interests of the legacy of Malcolm X, as well as the fact that you sort of resemble him with the red hair, with the glasses, with the goatee? Please, sir.
Malcolm X has always been a figure taught in schools very briefly, but he always stood out to me. His characteristics always stood out to me, almost like a father figure that was never there personally in my life. And the way he handled situations, the way he dealt with his friends, his family, the courage that he had to stand up for what he believed in, and he actually encouraged that on to a lot of young people. And just reading about that, I felt like just reading his speeches or his interviews is kind of like, okay, he's talking to me in certain instances, like, you know, you believe in this, Kelton, stand up for it, voice it, and be able to express to the world, like, how do you feel about certain situations. So it kind of gave me that spark to want to become a leader, and what it takes to be a leader. So Malcolm X is one of those father figures that is not a father but is a father. And it opened the path of learning about Islam and learning about that faith that I profess and what it really means and how that pretty much shapes who you are as a human being and how you live your life. So Malcolm X has always been one of my true heroes growing up. In my later years, as I started trying to figure out who I was as a person coming into my 20s.
Even with history connecting into your presentation of the film on Malcolm X. Malcolm X, produced by Spike Lee, intersects brilliantly with the Howard Mims Cultural Center as well as your interests. Now, we have had a chance to develop regularly an annual presentation where we invite students from our campus international school to our campus to hear a presentation about Rosa Parks and Ella Josephine Baker. With Sherry Tolliver as an actor in our community, she portrays Rosa Parks. And after a lesson about Ella Josephine Baker by way of the song by Sweet Honey in the Rock, on Ella's song, we then lead those children around to the Howard Mims Cultural Center, where our student organization leaders stand in the window and hold a mannequin pose for as long as they can, even without blinking.
Right.
And you stand in the window as Malcolm X.
Right.
So in addition to that, we want to share with our listening audience that in a complement to that type of presentation in our activities through the Cultural Center, we also go into classrooms and excite the students about our interest in keeping these speeches alive and extended to a next generation. So you go in and you represent Malcolm X with excerpts from the ballot or the bullet, and I join you with a reading. I tell the students, look at Kelton and see Malcolm X. I say, close your eyes and see Martin Luther King through my voice presentation. So we're going to give a little sample of how we give the conversations in the classrooms taught by our faculty members who may cover some of the history of Malcolm X and or Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of the conversations we have is reminding them that Malcolm X's speech came first in 1964. Thank you for the historians keeping me accurate. April 3rd, 1964, and then in 1968, Dr. King said some similar things. Please try to detect the similarities in certain aspects of the speeches that we're about to deliver at this time.
You take the people who are in this audience right now, they're poor. We're all poor as individuals. Our weekly salary individually amounts to hardly anything. But if you take the salary of everyone in here collectively, it'll fill up a whole lot of baskets. It's a lot of wealth. If you can collect the wages of just these people right here for a year, you'll be rich, richer than rich.
Then Dr. King said, individually, we're poor. When you compare us with white society in America, we're poor. But never stop and forget that collectively, that means all of us together collectively, the Negro is richer than most nations of the world, with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? The American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. That's power right there if we know how to pool it. We then have the students to explain what they're seeing as the similarity in those excerpts. And there are so many other parts of both speeches that show that these gentlemen express the same thing. Obviously, it's clear that Malcolm X was willing to say that if you weren't going to be polite to him, he was not going to be polite to you. Right. The conversation continues with other excerpts. Is there another excerpt you want to point out that we deliver, and we'll talk further about how even on April 4th annually here in Cleveland, in addition to our on-campus celebration, there is a celebration in the community that takes us to Greater Abyssinia Baptist Church. And with the support of Reverend E.T. Cavanis, as well as the members of the National Action Network, there's this opportunity to reflect on that. We're even noting that the Urban League of Greater Cleveland is having a program at Corey Methodist Church where both Dr. King and both Malcolm X had a chance to talk, to try to have conversations with Clevelanders who then impacted the world with the development of movements that extended across this nation. So if there's another part of the speech, we'll take a few minutes to give another presentation of another reading as our tribute to both Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well as Malcolm X in celebrating April 3rd and then reflecting on those celebrations on April 4th in Cleveland, Ohio. Something else that Malcolm said.
I think the next one pretty much talks about the narrative where people think of Malcolm X as violent. He says, if you don't take this kind of stand, your little children will grow up and look at you and think shame. If you don't take an uncompromising stand, I don't mean go out and get violent, but at the same time, you should never be nonviolent unless you run into some nonviolence. I'm nonviolent with those who are nonviolent with me, but when you drop that violence on me, then you made me go insane, and I'm not responsible for what I do.
We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country and say that God sent us by here. So right there, we see basically a distance 4-year conversation where it's a call and response. Right. You hear Malcolm X talking about Martin Luther King directly when you look further into the speech, but definitely indirectly in that excerpt. And you hear indirectly a response from Dr. King 4 years later back to Malcolm X and those who are gathered in the larger Black nationalist movement that is occurring and is being experienced right here in Cleveland, Ohio. That's why it's great to have a Black Studies program at Cleveland State University, because so much of that history that changed this nation, again, and as Dr. King even said, made America a better nation, definitely with room for improvement still, but that occurred right here in Cleveland. And it's occurring through conversations with students like you who are engaged at Cleveland State, engaged in the greater Cleveland community. Any prospects in terms of upcoming announcements for our audience to be attentive to in regard to something that Speak Up will be doing as we close in the next 30 seconds?
Next Friday, April 5th, we have our 5th annual Speak Up Deaf Poetry Jam event, which will be in Berkman Hall Auditorium at Cleveland State University. Our featured poet this year is Mo Grays. He's a local poet who has definitely been involved with a lot of Speak Up events. It starts at 7:30. The doors open at 7 p.m. and it's definitely a great opportunity to come out and see CSU poets and community poets on a much bigger stage.
And we also try to, through the Howard Mims Cultural Center, engage our students with various community members and various community groups. We will be having on April 6th a celebration with members of the Cleveland Police and Fire Departments who will be playing some basketball with our students. Some community members will be joining us in that discussion, that celebration, and then Dr. Mary Myers will be servicing as she works with the College of Urban Affairs as an advisor and coaching through students through this academic process, again showing these ways that we engage students at Cleveland State University through the Howard Mims Cultural Center. Kelton, once again, thank you for joining us once again on Images, and thank you to our listening audience for tuning in. If you have more interest in Black Studies, please call us at 216-687-3655 or consider the emails and other ways to get in touch with us here at Cleveland State University through the Black Studies program. Thank you once again for tuning in to Images.
You have been listening to Images, a public affairs radio program produced by the Cleveland State University Black Studies Program and this station. The opinions expressed were those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cleveland State University, the Black Studies Program, or the station. We hope you have enjoyed the music performed by the Jazz Heritage Orchestra. If you are interested in finding out more about the Black Studies Program, call 216-687-3655 or visit our website at www.csuohio.edu/blackstudies.